Very quickly before we start, I just want to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, NordVPN. In case you've somehow never heard of a VPN, it's about time you get paranoid because these days our entire lives are online, and we think we'll never be the victims of identity theft until it happens to us. Luckily, getting yourself and all your devices protected can be both easy and affordable. NordVPN features military-grade encryption, super fast servers, and 24/7 customer support. If you head on over to nordvpn.com/ReignBot, you can get 75% off a 3-year plan, and if you use promo code ReignBot, they'll give you an additional month on top of that, absolutely free. Like I said before, NordVPN is also great for things like watching content unavailable in your country for whatever reason, whether it be evil government censorship or just the lack of availability. Again, head over to nordvpn.com/ReignBot and use promo code ReignBot for an additional month absolutely free. Thank you again, NordVPN, for being a now longtime supporter of the channel, and with that said, back to the show. ARG, or Alternate Reality Game. In case you've never heard of such a thing, ARGs are a form of interactive storytelling in which players are given several tasks and challenges to complete or solve. These may come in the form of a scavenger hunt, a puzzle of some sort, or even a more straightforward task that'll lead you to your next clue. Each step draws you more and more into the narrative, and by the end, you should have a full picture. Think escape room, but without the limited setting. In general, modern-day ARGs tend to take place online through the use of social media. Their creators, everyday people with an idea and determination to make something even without the potential for financial gain. Before the existence of the modern-day scene, however, the art form was most associated with viral marketing. If you've been watching my channel for quite some time now, then you already know what an ARG is, and you're probably wondering why I bothered explaining this if you guys already know what they are. Well, as you can see from the title, today's topic of discussion is the Stranger Things Season 3 ARG, Operation Scoop Snoop. While doing my research for this one, I noticed that a lot of people were saying that it was their first ARG, or that they were playing it but didn't know what an ARG was at all. With that said though, I am kind of surprised at how little buzz this thing has generated, especially considering the grand prize for winning, along with the fact that there was quite a bit put into the marketing wave that this thing was featured in. Just a quick note before we jump into the timeline of this game, if you clicked on this video and you're ready to sit through the weirdness of a Stranger Things ARG, then I'm going to assume that you're a fan of the show and already have watched the new season. If you haven't and you don't want potential spoilers, or you have no idea what I'm talking about here, walk away now, you have been warned. I also want to note that the ARG and related elements I'm talking about are within the US, and while there were other versions of the game and marketing material, trust me, you don't want me to get into that today. With that said, this ARG did have a few hiccups, which I'll get into towards the end. I also wanted to make sure to credit the Discord for this ARG along with the specific Reddit post for documenting the events. They were my primary sources for the initial research that went into this video, and they will be linked below. I also want to thank user PR5K for helping me further confirm the timeline, as most of the screenshots you're about to see came directly from him. So let's start off with some basic context. Everything to do with this game, from initial hints all the way to the prizes being announced, took place between late May and mid-July 2019. The actual game, however, took place over roughly 2 weeks. As for its theme and hook, you're playing as a new operative in a covert group dedicated to closing gates or portals to other dimensions that have been popping up across the globe. Oh, also the year is 1985, keep that in mind. Again, I'm assuming you've seen the show, so stuff like what I just said should make sense to you. Now that that's out of the way, let's just start from the beginning. So you've probably seen those Baskin-Robbins Stranger Things commercials, you know, the ones with the trippy music advertising limited promotional items. The thing is, this is all I knew until I came across people saying an ARG was involved. You would think someone like me would be the primary target for such a game, but somehow it managed to completely go over my head since the commercials I saw were the specific ones I just described, which, as you can see here, or at least it appears, don't contain any lead-ins to the game. The marketing collab with Baskin-Robbins began as early as late May, or at least the hype for it did. On May 28th of 2019, the Baskin-Robbins news blog posted this article. The article, titled "How Things Are Getting Stranger at Baskin-Robbins in June," describes a number of new flavors and collectibles, including a Funko Pop that apparently made people very angry. I think that's how you pronounce that. They also announced something that I'd imagine was pretty exciting for dedicated fans. A real-life Scoops Ahoy ice cream shop in the form of a food truck. The article only mentions that the Scoops Ahoy ice cream truck would make an appearance on the West Coast, but no further details were provided. From what I understand, the truck never happened, and instead residents of California were greeted with a full-on, real-life Scoops Ahoy store, a Baskin-Robbins with a different skin. This store, however, didn't actually open until July 2nd, just 2 days before the July 4th premiere of Stranger Things Season 3. This location is going to play a major role in this ARG, but before I get into that, I need to briefly talk about TV commercials yet again. According to the Discord I mentioned a second ago, on July 20th, an ad on Comedy Central related to the Baskin-Robbins / Scoops Ahoy collab had aired.
Ahoy!
Ahoy, sailor! Get on board the USS Butterscotch, the new Scoops Ahoy flavor sailing into Baskin-Robbins. It's the flavor teenagers can't stop talking about. Scoops Ahoy! Baskin-Robbins! Call now!
As you can see, the ad left us with a phone number, which, at the time of writing this, no longer works. According to those who were there at the time, however, calling the number got you a message explaining that this was the Operation 31 recruitment line. To join, it explained you had to decode the wheel that was found at your local Baskin-Robbins locations. And of course, just a few days later, this post surfaced on the Stranger Things subreddit. Before we get into these two leads, however, I want to point out that at this point, it said that the Scoops Ahoy commercial had essentially gone missing. People were trying to keep an eye out just in case it aired again, but to no avail. Eventually, and I mean weeks later, the commercial did resurface, but by that point it was irrelevant. I will get into why later on, as an official reason was provided by the development team, but for now, let's continue onward with our other leads. Despite the Scoops Ahoy ad disappearing, the phone number still remained active, but it did change. Now, instead of talking about the cipher wheel, the message instructed players to wait until July 5th, and also reminded them to stay vigilant. Things stayed quiet for the next few days until July 2nd, which again was the opening of the pop-up Scoops Ahoy shop in California. By the next day, July 3rd, BuzzFeed had posted this article talking about the new location. Along with it came pictures, one of which was the cipher wheel from before, and another featuring the labels of some of the promotional exclusives. When you're busy looking around at a fictional ice cream shop from a hit show, you're probably not overly concerned with any tiny details such as the Morse code you see here. Of course, given that this was pointed out in the article, people knew where to look. When translated, the Morse code reads this. As you may have guessed, the digits are indeed a phone number, a different one from the one advertised on TV that we mentioned earlier. Despite this, however, the messaging remained the same, come back on July 5th, which was now just 2 days away. Once July 5th hit, we did indeed get an update. This time the number uncovered from the Morse code requested a password. Again, this is what the code translated to. The N-bit Cerebro is a part of the show and also happens to be the password. Entered into the keypad, Cerebro becomes 2373276. Once entered, you get the following message. Password received. Thank you. Please hold. Operation Scoop Snoop is a covert operation that's goal is to shut down portals and other anomalies that have been appearing around Hawkins. You will be asked to perform 5 missions in the coming days. Move as quickly as possible through your missions. We will be closely monitoring your progress against others, but first you must connect to our secure server. We've been given early access to this technology that is well beyond anything else 1985 has to offer. Please find a pen and paper to write down the address. You have 10 seconds. Write this address down very carefully. You must include spaces. Once connected to the server, this is what players are greeted with. Upon choosing to continue, you are introduced to your handler for Operation Scoop Snoop, which I'm going to abbreviate to S7 because I cannot pronounce this. S7 tells you that there isn't much time and reiterates the points made during the first phone call briefing. The gates need to be not only located but successfully closed. This is the primary objective of the game. S7 then explains that you'll be completing a series of tasks that they'll provide. They also stress just how high the stakes are and how bad things could really get if they remain open, or if they fall into the hands of Russian operatives. Keep in mind, ARG does stand for alternate reality, and this reality takes place alongside the show, right in the middle of the 1980s and the height of the Cold War. A few more ground rules are laid out. It's made clear that you're on the intel team, and no physical travel will be necessary yet. For now, all you'll need to do is gather data and relay what you find back to S7. S7 explains that 1985 had been quite eventful, and that France had been testing nuclear weapons. The location of said testing, however, is unknown. This is the part where either you Google France Nuke Test 1985 to get the answer, or you lie to everyone and pretend that you already knew the name of the location, which happens to be this. S7 provides you with a confirmation that this info is indeed accurate, but unfortunately, no gates were detected. Players were instructed to return the next day at 12 noon, which puts us at July 6 for the second task. This time, S7 briefs you on nuclear tests being carried out by Soviets. Just like last time, your task is to find out where, which means more Googling unless you're a walking history book. With the extra info that the codename for the site is the Polygon, you should be able to come up with the following answer. Just like last time, however, the site turns out to not be a gate. You're once again instructed to return the next day at the same time for another task. We're now on July 7, 2019, 12 noon. S7 reported having info from an older report, one specifically from January 7th of 1985 concerning a power surge in Japan. Googling the keywords January 7, 1985 in Japan will get you results pointing to the Sakigake aircraft, the first of its kind to be launched by places other than the US or Soviet Union, according to Wikipedia. Players were then asked for the launch vehicle or rocket type, which again can be Googled. This turns out to be yet another red herring, however, with no gates found. The spacecraft was determined to be the cause of the power surge, not any sort of portals opening up. With 3 for 3 misses, S7 explains needing a better way to track down gates, and that you've been promoted to operations. As usual, you're instructed to stand by until 12 noon the next day. Now, in case you were worried that this ARG was entirely going to be nothing but Googling historical info, you'd be wrong. Now that you've been promoted to operations, things are going to get much, much more interesting. July 8th. You now have access to many more features within the server, such as your inbox, a hall of fame, and files containing various command prompts. You're also told about access points, which you'll soon be able to see once you complete more tasks. At this point, your inbox is already filled with messages, and S7 points out an operative that's gone off the deep end with ramblings about Russian conspiracy theories. Checking your inbox will show you that it's an operative that goes by Troop HD, who I'll refer to as Troop from this point forward. The inbox unlocked today will come into play tomorrow at noon. July 9th. S7 reports on the new gate location method, satellites. Players were tasked with going through their messages in order to locate 3 sets of coordinates, which then needed to be inputted into the newly unlocked access point featuring a map. The following emails contain coordinates confirmed by the system to be gates, and once submitted, S7 reminds you that there isn't a lot of time, and that by noon tomorrow you may finally be closing your first gate. In case you were curious, the coordinates, of course, did lead to real-life locations. One in Mississippi, another near Southgate, California, and finally one in Pennsylvania, specifically the site of what's known as the 3 Mile Island accident, a partial nuclear meltdown that happened in 1979 at the 3 Mile Island nuclear generating station. July 10th. S7 starts off by introducing you to your first gate located in Mississippi under the New Gulf Nuclear Station. They also note 2 things: that their generators could be shut down remotely, and that their security system was designed by a paper and pencil RPG nerd, because reasons. S7 opens up the Gulf Nuclear Station access point, then requested the kill switch password to be forwarded their way once all the generators were disabled. So how exactly did players do this? They were prompted with 4 riddles, again set in place by a person described as an RPG nerd. As per the show's theme, the answers all turned out to be Dungeons & Dragons related and were as follows. Admittedly, unlike the show's characters, I'm not that familiar with D&D lore, so I'm assuming that you could have figured this out via Google. Alternatively, there were emails within your inbox that provided you with the answers if you paid attention. Once all 4 answers were obtained, the kill switch password was generated and the gate closed. The usual instructions applied once again, and players would return at noon the next day. July 11th. S7 confirms the 3 Mile Island location in Pennsylvania, but also tells us that the encrypted code to open the access point isn't working. These are the next few messages. They provide us with the code and mention needing a cipher to decrypt. This is where the wheel from the beginning comes back into play. If you take the wheel and translate it, these are the letters you're going to get. Match those up and you'll get the following equation. Solve that and you'll get this. S7 confirms that this is in fact the right answer, but then returns with some bad news. 3 Mile Island is reported to be heavily fortified, and thus a terrible idea to pursue at this time. Instead, you'll be investigating the final location first, Southgate. July 12th. S7 explains to us that there was an incident at Southgate before we were online, something about strange men in white suits. Thankfully, however, operatives on our team were able to close the gate before the men reached it. S7 then abruptly says that they have to go, that the next day will be when we finally tackle 3 Mile Island, the now final gate. Once again, we're instructed to return tomorrow at the same time. Those who logged off at this point would miss out on some important info brought to them via their inbox, which we know at this point to be a valuable source for hints and clues about the game, even when it comes to messages that seem pointless at first. In it today were a sequence of emails that would lead you to believe that your handler, S7, isn't entirely being honest with you. Troop, the operative accused of being a conspiracy theorist, told us that we were placed on watch because our handler, S7, had gone MIA. I'd also like to add that by this point, there was also this email in players' inboxes. It confirmed Troop's suspicion of Russian involvement within the operation, and thus proved that he wasn't out of his mind. The Reddit post I mentioned earlier also notes that when asked certain questions such as, "Are you evil?" S7 would respond with things like, "Everything is for the greater good," which sounds like some spy shit to me. So yeah, S7 is a damn spy. Which is fitting because I didn't want to spoil this from the beginning, but Russian-speaking players pointed out that S7's handle literally translates to Spy 7. Anyway, at this point, despite the knowledge that our handler is a doo-doo head, we'll have to report back for duty at noon as promised. July 13th. Also my birthday, which I spent bundled up inside because of Hurricane Barry. Just a heads up, things are going to get a little confusing here in terms of visuals, so just follow what I'm saying and don't worry too much about what you're seeing. Players are once again contacted by S7, this time telling us that the 3 Mile Island was near. Remember those files that we were given access to upon promotion? The ones full of command prompts? This is when players finally get to use them. S7 explains that they'd be moving room by room through the installation, and to listen up for the required commands. Players were then instructed to open the 3 Mile Island access point menu and to continue communications there. Once access is granted, this is what the interface looks like. You've got your chat on the left and floor plan on the right. This little rectangle indicates where S7 is while talking to you. So in case this is already a bit confusing, what'll happen here is that S7 makes their way throughout the facility, and they'll need you to remotely manipulate things like you've done before. The players did this by entering command prompts listed in their file folders. As you can see here, there are commands to dampen, start, stop, etc. All the player has to do is manipulate these commands based on whatever specification S7 needs at the given time. For example, the first thing they needed from players was to bypass the keypad so they could continue forward. As you can see here, the player did make a couple mistakes, but eventually figured out what exactly needed to be typed in order to make this happen, which meant that S7 was free to move forward. I seriously hope that this makes sense, because I'm not the best at explaining these things. Anyway, in the hallway, S7 notices flickering lights and also notes, quote, panicked movements from down the hall. They then ask you to cut the power in order for them to stay covert, and once you do, a light is revealed at the end of the hall. It's specifically coming from the commander's office. S7 goes in to investigate, and at this point we're probably all wondering why we're helping a spy, but we do it anyway. They tell us the commander's office is a mess, completely disheveled. Suddenly a loud noise is heard, and S7 borderline shits himself. It's something. Some kind of small, green creature contained in a cage. S7 notes how much noise it's making, enough to probably blow their cover. You remotely put it to sleep in order to keep things quiet. You're also asked to cut out the camera feeds, which isn't sketchy at all, but you do it anyway. Just then, S7 realizes something. The security cameras you just hacked have remote play, which you then use to check on a recent power surge from a few days ago. Upon doing this, S7 reports seeing quite a few interesting things. Soldiers, lab techs, even the commander. They also note that these people were at somewhere called the Vault, around a reactor where a gate was opened, and something had emerged from it. From here, you do a few more commands to keep S7 hidden until they eventually reach the break room. Keep in mind, it's still dark, so the workers found there were terrified. They mistook S7 for the creature that emerged from the gate, something that they were calling by code name Lucy. Once S7 reaches the lab, they note finding the commander, also in a state of hysteria, but this time correct about Lucy being nearby. Just beyond the lab was a vault door. Within it, Lucy had been located. S7, instead of sounding afraid, came off entirely pleased and chose to abruptly fuck off while even saying goodbye in Russian. With S7 firmly on a date with an interdimensional being, players were left with nothing to do today but check their inboxes. In it were a bunch of new messages from other operatives, with subject lines basically reiterating the fact that shit had hit the fan. Troop sent out an email regarding the Russian infiltration of Operation Snoop, and also included a list of operatives who helped confirm this. Not to break immersion right now, but I think it's important to note that the screen names you see here are some of the people who actively participated in the ARG, which is pretty cool of them to do. We also got this message from Troop. He explains that S7 wasn't one of us, what a surprise, and that we technically just helped the men in white suits. Despite this, Troop offers us a chance at redemption. Tomorrow, according to him, would be dedicated to taking back 3 Mile Island. July 14th, 3 Mile Island Day 2. We start the final day with emails from Troop. In this one, he once again mentions a few operatives, who again were players in the game. Again, pretty cool of them. Troop also asks us for help accessing 3 Mile Island once again. For the most part, today's gameplay is the same as it was yesterday, the chat on the left, the map on the right, except now, Troop is calling the shots. The mission, of course, is to actually close the gate and get rid of Lucy somehow before she gets loose. Last time, S7 had us cut the lights because sketchy, so this time Troop needs them back on. Upon doing so, he tells us that there's blood everywhere within the hallways, a telling sign of what took place the day before. He then hears something, possibly Lucy. We cut the lights again. We're then asked to create some kind of distraction. Players redirected Lucy to the office via making noise, and Troop was able to lock her inside. Troop continues until he finds the break room, along with the men S7 tied up the day before, or at least what was left of them. Lucy then breaks out of the office, but before she could hurt anyone, players were able to flood the area and zap her, leaving her temporarily stunned and giving Troop enough time to book it to the vault. While trying to close the gate, Lucy wakes up. Luckily, the door to the vault is closed. The security feed comes into play once more, this time providing a live feed of the lab where we finally get to see a glimpse of what Lucy looks like. Troop then hysterically asks us if we're able to flood the lab with gas. By this point, the video feed had cut off. Since we aren't a-holes, we indeed do fill the lab with gas and blow Lucy up, which hopefully killed her, but there's no way to know for certain. We also remotely overload the reactor and successfully close the gate. Now that your mission at the 3 Mile Island is done, you're able to head back to your chat log with S7, who for some reason decided to leave you messages while you weren't looking like some salty ex. Checking in with your new boo, Troop will tell you that you've been redeemed and that he's proud of you. He also tells you that you've been added to the Operation Snoop Hall of Fame, and he asks for you to fax something over. Keep in mind, it is 1985 after all. Okay, so here's the juicy part. From what I understand, out of all of the people who had played the game, only a certain number made it to the Hall of Fame. Of the Hall of Fame, only the top 13 were given prizes. The day after the game ended, players received emails from Scoops Ahoy, one of which confirmed that the fax had been received and in return, a number was given, this of course being the number to redeem your prize. There was also an email formally thanking people for playing along. So you're probably wondering who won and what it is they won. So this is the leaderboard, and because I'm not subtle at all, yes, that first person over there is PR5K, the same person who helped me with filling out the gaps in the script. I had contacted him about his experience with the game, and he actually offered me a pretty much complete timeline of everything that had happened. Again, if you're watching, I seriously appreciate the help with this. PR5K's prize for coming in first place is both free Baskin-Robbins for life and an in-person visit to the set of Stranger Things, which I think is pretty damn cool if you ask me. PR5K wanted to remain mostly anonymous, but he did tell me that this was actually his first time ever playing an ARG, and that he wasn't really much of a regular ARG player. According to him, it wasn't necessarily due to lack of interest, but rather arriving late to the party. I asked if he had any particular skills that helped him reach number 1, given that the leaderboard was based on time, and he noted that while his knowledge of coding is basic, he was able to use it to his advantage during the 3 Mile Island sections. He also told me that because the section was split into 2 days, having a practice day definitely helped him out once it was time for the real finale. Now, with all this said, I didn't want to pry too much because I'm sure that there are things that he can't tell me right now. For example, a lot of people want to know if he's going to be able to take pictures or document his visit on set, but I doubt that even he knows the answer to this at this time. Some people are saying that Stranger Things Season 4 will be the final season, so I'd imagine that they would keep things pretty heavily under wraps. Then again, prior to Season 3, I also heard that it was supposed to be the last season, which obviously wasn't true. Plus, I'm kinda doubtful that Netflix is going to actually discard one of their most valuable properties. Hopefully we'll be hearing more from PR5K in the future, and fingers crossed that they'll allow him to post pictures of his visit. Okay, so there were a few things I promised I'd clarify. Let me preface this by saying that this ARG was definitely not perfect, but then again, none are. There were quite a few missteps that led to confusion amongst players early on. Allow me to elaborate. Remember that commercial that aired on Comedy Central like once? The one with the phone number at the end from June? The thing is, it went missing for a reason. The developers of the ARG actually did an AMA on the Discord, and this whole thing was brought up. According to them, this commercial actually aired by accident about 2 weeks early. How that happens, I don't really know, but Comedy Central messed up their ARG. We can also assume that the cipher wheel, this one, if you recall, the one that wasn't really put into use until later, was actually also a mistake. Most people commenting about finding the wheel in their local Baskin-Robbins noted that the employees had no idea what it was for, and as such, we can assume that some locations had placed them out way too early. On top of these things, there are actually a few other elements of the story that I left out, lest I run the risk of making this video completely incomprehensible. Rewind to the beginning. Before the American ARG even started, another one in the Netherlands had been closing up. This version was a little bit different. It featured a Twitter account as its centerpiece, which naturally threw American players off course. From what I understand, there was also more than just the one US pop-up Scoops Ahoy shop, but I'm not entirely sure if they provided any cryptic marketing in their respective areas. Another company to hop on the Stranger Things promo collab was Microsoft. On July 5th, keep in mind that this was right in the heart of the ARG beginning with the Morse code number, Microsoft tweeted, "Note the code and display." The code, by the way, reads July 8th. As it turns out, this was completely unrelated to the ARG and was an independent collaboration between both parties. Again, you can imagine how much this confused everyone playing the ARG at the time. From what I understand, these aren't the only two examples. I believe there are a few more instances of confusing material being released at the same time the ARG had been going on. Now, admittedly, since I got to the party late, I wasn't able to play along while others were active, and the mistakes that were made here were probably the most difficult part of figuring out an accurate timeline of this game. Like I said a second ago, however, no ARG is perfect, and this was definitely cool to see come from a show as big as Stranger Things. I do realize that I could keep going on about this with theories about how this ARG ties into the show, whether or not it's canon, the identity of Troop, etc., but I think it's best left up to you guys for now. PR5K made sure to make me aware of how much everyone enjoyed the experience brought about by this ARG, specifically noting that it was balanced enough to be both fun and challenging at the same time, and most of all, accessible to almost every skill level. At the end of the day, what we have here is a fun, text-based alternate reality game that takes elements of actual history and science fiction and marries them into one cohesive, supplementary narrative to accompany a giant when it comes to modern-day popular media. Oh, and ice cream. Ice cream's cool too. Hey guys, so this is probably weird. This is me. I just recorded the video, as you can see here. Before we end, I just want to give a huge thank you to the people who sent me this. That would be Cole and JT. This is from Cole. This is from JT, who I believe has a shop, as you can see here. I'm going to link the info down below. I am not good when I'm off script, I'm so sorry. But yeah, no, Cole and JT, thank you so much for sending me these things. I need to give you guys like a better look at this one. You guys can probably see my reflection, which is a little bit weird. Anyway. It's cool, isn't it? Okay, yeah, I know this is probably like super awkward, but I just wanted to get this on camera because I never do this kind of stuff, right? Anyway, sorry, if you can hear outside, it's a little bit loud, I guess. But anyway, yeah. So if you guys want to send me anything, preferably stickers, I guess, or something small like that, send it to this address. Should be on screen right now if I remember to edit it in. Before you send it, if you're watching this sometime in the distant future, make sure that you check my, my about section, sorry, on my channel, because I may be changing the P.O. box address, blah, 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 blah. So yeah, with that said, just make sure you verify that first. And if you want to send me anything, I may or may not film it. Look, the top has me too. Again, here's a sushi kitty. And I think that's supposed to be a takoyaki, maybe. I don't actually know, but it's amazing. Okay, all right, I've talked enough. I'm gonna go. I'll talk to y'all soon.